This is episode 7 of the Mindful Movement. For me, episode 7 is going to be a special one, mainly because 7 has always been a significant number. There was a period of time in my life where I was called 7. It's always been special to me. So for the 7th episode of the Mindful Movement, we're going to change it up a little bit. I know we've been talking about intentions and getting things done and focus and flow and all that jazz, but I wanted to change the topic a little bit and honor the number 7. So how are we going to do that? We're going to talk about the 7 Hermetic principles. And the 7 Hermetic principles have been very special to me because once I was first introduced to them, they definitely changed my life. And when I heard Hermeticism through the 7 Hermetic principles, took a dive into that. But I liked the practicality of what the 7 Hermetic principles provides us when you really get a good understanding. And people will take the 7 Hermetic principles differently. And I think that's also beautiful. And you'll see this throughout. There's definitely different interpretations of them. And even the 7 Hermetic principles is an interpretation of something even deeper. And we'll talk about that. So let's jump right in. The 7 Hermetic principles, what are they? Where'd they come from? So the 7 Hermetic principles were formalized in a book first published in 1908 called The Kybalion. It was written by William Walker Atkinson. And it's important to know that because he was a very prominent figure within the New Thought movement. And in short, the New Thought movement was based on Christian mysticism. There was a lot of faith-based healing type stuff by Phineas Quimby. There was a number of different people that helped start the movement that really caught on to the teachings. And that was even inspired by mesmerism from Europe in the early 1800s, made its way to the US, and people were just buying it up. And the New Thought movement really got boiled down to the power of one's thought, and that you could change your life if you changed your thoughts. Sound familiar? The secret, the law of attraction, the power of concentration, the power of focus, the power of intentional living, all of that tends to stem through the New Thought movement. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because the 7 Hermetic principles was inspired by the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, which is likely a mythical person that was inspired by the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. And that's amalgamated into one archetype. And that archetype is pretty much the carrier of wisdom. In Egyptian esoteric teachings, Thoth existed before the pharaohs, and he's the one that pretty much invented civilization and knowledge and science. And very key characters when we are looking for truth within the existence. So Hermes Trismegistus definitely seen as a magician. Magic and a lot of that stuff stems from Hermeticism. And Hermeticism, the Corpus Hermeticum, pretty much was formed around the 1st and 2nd century AD. And again, it's Greek and Egyptian esoteric teachings. So what's happened is that these Hermetic concepts from Hermeticism, early 1st and 2nd century Hermeticism, highly influenced by the Gnostics, got ingested by or got consumed by William Walker Atkinson and possibly some other co-writers. And then through their understanding of the New Thought movement, they wrote the 7 Hermetic principles. Regardless of the source and the purity of what it claims to be, I still think they're very useful principles. And we're going to jump right in to what they are and really just discuss practical applications of those things. And again, there's tons of information now. A couple years ago, 10 years ago, maybe not so much. This, like I said, The Secret, a lot of the books that require one's use of intentional thought and emotion, that's all New Thought movement. So let's jump right in and talk about the 7 Hermetic principles, each one of them. And the first one is the principle of mentalism. Now, what if I told you that your entire reality is shaped by your thoughts? The Kybalion says the all is mind, the universe is mental. In the Kybalion, we see that there are 3 major planes. spirit plane, the mental plane, and the physical plane. In the Kabbalion, the ability to control our mental plane is how we can take our soul desires, those really strong, passionate things that we want. We can focus on those in our mental plane, and we can take those energies and manifest that into the physical reality. Another way of looking at the principle of mentalism is that everything you experience is experienced in your conscious and subconscious mind. The way you understand the world is filtered through that paradigm, the collection of thoughts. I can't help but to think of the Book of Law from the Four Agreements. And in that Book of Law, you have all these things written down that you agree to, whether you consciously agree to them or not. And that is what your paradigm is composed of. Those agreements, those thoughts, those beliefs. When you can take an inventory of those things and you can actually wield your mind as a tool rather than this tool out of control, then you can start creating intentionally in your universe. A lot of us now are creating unintentionally, and that's usually because we are so distracted in our life. We are unaware of the subconscious creations in our world, and we are wondering why certain things happen in our life. And a lot of it has to do with not really being able to control the tool that we have, which is our mind. So let's jump into the next principle, and that's the principle of correspondence. Have you ever wondered why the phrase "as above, so below" holds the secret to understanding the universe? Have you heard of that phrase? If you have, it comes from the Emerald Tablet, and it shows up in the Kabbalion, and it says, "As above, so below; as below, so above; as within, so without; as without, so within." Really, what that comes down to is that any microcosm is a reflection of its macrocosm and vice versa. But what does that mean? That means that if you can understand the patterns within one layer of experience or life, those are bound to show up in a larger layer or a smaller layer or a higher layer or a lower one. In Capoeira, we have a saying, and especially in our group, Capoeira na roda, Capoeira na vida. That means that the skills that are required to play the game of Capoeira can be applied in life. The skill of being able to read your opponent, to understand where the movements are coming from, to understand what their intentions are, to understand their energy, what type of energy are they playing with, to be able to move our body in a way that we can escape a potential attack. All of those things are tools that we can use in our everyday life. Can we identify, can we size up the situation? Can we position ourselves to be in the most advantageous position? Can we flow with the challenges that come with our life? So that is a really practical application of the principle of correspondence. Another way you can see it is you can usually see it like this, that the spirit plane influences the mental plane, and that influences the physical plane. So the health of the spirit plane will influence the health of the mental, and on. What in the physical world of somebody, the external world of somebody, is likely reflective of what's happening inside of it, and vice versa. There's a lot of different patterns you can find throughout the entirety of life. And when you understand the relationships between each aspect of life and how the patterns, how various patterns exist within them, and you understand those patterns, you can use that understanding of those patterns in whatever aspect of your life. And that is definitely a skill. The next principle is the principle of vibration. Did you know that changing your vibe can literally change your life? Well, what do I mean by that? According to the Kabbalion, it says nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. If you are vibrating at a certain frequency, let's say we take it from higher vibrations, more happy, lighter, more enjoyable emotions, thoughts. We have lower vibrations, which are more negative, more destructive, more heavier, depressive type thoughts. If you do things that raise your vibration, raise your energy, you're likely to attract other things that sustain that energy, that type of frequency. You will attract people that tend to be happier, tend to be more active, tend to be more lively, to have a lighter approach to life. On the contrary, if you tend to be depressed, you're going to repel those types of people because they can't operate on that same frequency. Another way to look at it is that the energies through the planes, when you look at correspondence, if you're at a low spiritual, if you're rocking low spiritual energy on this spiritual plane, you can change that by leveraging certain aspects in your life, physically become active and get rid of that lower energy and expel it, doing some somatic healing or whatever the case is, right? That can raise the other aspects of the other planes. There's a lot of, I can't go into all of it in 30 minutes or however long this is going to be, but there's a lot of ways you can apply this. And we've only taken the concepts of the first 3 principles. As we go along, we're going to find that when you start mixing the understandings of these principles, they pretty much all apply to each other and they all build and they add different layers of dimension. So the next principle is the principle of polarity. So what if I told you that love and hate are the same things? Are you shocked? Let me explain. The Kabbalion says everything is dual, everything has its poles. Opposites are identical in nature, but just different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. So this principle is important, especially to Hermeticists, because it suggests that we can change the polarity of an emotion by recognizing that it's the same and choosing which degree of that spectrum of emotions that suit our needs. And often, if we're pissed about something, that will have its own consequences. That's going to affect how we make decisions later on. And we can choose that maybe we're not going to be happy about it, but we can be more on the neutral side to where we can think clearly and we can reframe the situation and possibly clear the way so that we can find an advantage. The principle of polarity definitely, when you start seeing the poles and you try to look like, okay, what is this, a negative situation in my life? What are the goods in it? You don't have to change necessarily the situation, but can we find anything beneficial? Can we find anything good? Can I shift my view or my perspective on this seemingly negative situation? Can I see the positives? And again, if you apply the framework that we're operating within, the principle of mentalism, this is all within our mind, right? So can we reframe mentally, practice appreciation of those positive things, see the advantages, the potential silver linings, and then lean into that? So the principle of polarity, definitely a fun tool. The next one is the principle of rhythm. And does it ever seem like life is more or less a roller coaster where there's highs and lows? The secret of understanding why this is in the rhythm of the universe. And the Kabbalion says everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Ironically, I did that to the opposite side. Rhythm compensates. The principle of rhythm just states that everything in life has its natural cycles. The cycle of life, birth, maturity, decline into old age, death. There's birth and rebirth through the cycles of the year. Every time spring comes around, we know what to expect. Every time winter happens, we know what to expect. Civilizations have evolved because their understanding of natural cycles within life. And this basically is a rhythm of the universe. Everything has its rhythm. And when we are able to identify those rhythms, we can move accordingly. We can anticipate things and we can position ourselves in a place that allows us to be in the best position. I can't help but to think about capoeira. This is a key aspect, is understanding the principles of rhythm. We use this all the time in capoeira. When we're interacting with a partner within a game, we play the music, but we also play with the rhythm of the other person. And there might be some attack or some advance, and we might retreat. We may have move in and out. And that principle of rhythm helps us navigate and identify what's going to happen. And it can really help us reclaim our personal power and in some ways be ahead of the game. So the next principle is the principle of cause and effect. Have you ever felt like you were at the mercy of fate? Well, what if I told you that you were the master of your destiny? The principle of cause and effect says that every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. It suggests that nothing happens by chance and that there's a reason for every action and a consequence for every action. The key takeaway from this is that we can choose to be the cause in our life, which means we are reclaiming our own personal power. If we choose to act on something, we have controlled the effect by our action. We can choose to be passive and allow life to just do whatever it is to us. But that is the cause of the effects that we're feeling within our life. If we feel like we're out of control, it's because we've let things get out of control. We've chosen in the past to not take care of certain things, to not take care of our responsibilities. And this is really what the core of this principle is. The majority of the quality of our life is due to our own action, what we have allowed to happen. And we can either allow it by choosing it, actively choosing it, or being inactive. The last principle is the principle of gender. Did you know that the universe has masculine and feminine energies? And you do too. And here's why it matters. So the universe has two primary forms, according to the Hermetic principles, two primary groups of energies. The masculine, which is more penetrative, assertive, progressive, conquesting, explorative, and it drives progress. The feminine is more receptive, sacred, treasured, it's protected, it maintains tradition, it honors the priority of what's most important, and it nourishes what is most essential to life. When there's a balance of these energies, we can create. As simple as that. There needs to be a time where we're imagining in our mind, visualizing, which is attributed to the feminine energies. And then when we drive an action that takes that imagination and then manifests it into the physical world. This is not talking about just the physical plane. There are spiritual feminine energies. Mentally, there are feminine, masculine energies. And this is really just trying to understand how to classify those and how they work in the mental and spiritual realms. And when you find balance in between, or when you can oscillate through the principle of rhythm, that is when you can learn to create and have control over the creations within your life. So that was the 7 Hermetic principles. We can dive into each one a lot further because trying to sum these up, it can be a challenge because they're all connected and you can use combinations of these laws. This is not a deep dive in any one. And I do think if you're able to really spend time with these principles, you can actually employ a lot of strategy with your life. And these have definitely allowed me to navigate through life with more flow. And I definitely feel there's been less struggle in my life. And I felt, again, for the 7th episode, what more fitting than to talk about the 7 tools or the 7 principles that I use to help me through life. So thank you for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed this. I had to really spend time on this episode to make sure that I got good information out. And again, I feel like there's going to be a deep dive into each one of these because there's so many different things, especially there's certain principles that I'm really good with. Other ones I haven't mastered, but I would love to cover those in a deeper dive. Let me know if you want those in the comments below. You can subscribe and feel free to share. Thanks again. And until the next time,